And it is a beautiful, bright morning here in the Chicagoland region. We are slowly advancing into springtime. So we'll be going from the 20s and 30s today into the 70s in a couple of days. And wow, what a wonderful thing, this adventure of spring. So how are you this morning, Barrett?
I'm doing pretty good, Chris. Doing pretty good. Thanks for asking. And yeah, I always enjoy this time of warming. And yeah, I even think that it can be a little bit of a spiritual symbol for our warming up to our truth. You know, that there's that sort of eternal warmth in us, and there are times where it feels like it's a little cold inside. But as we do this healing, all that ice melts away, and we come back into our truth.
That's absolutely true. And like the crocuses and jonquils and daffodils, it's, it takes a little bit of effort to break through, to get those feelers out and become expanded into the world and the realm of light. So it's the journey that we're all on, apparently.
Yeah, to come into our truth. You know, I think a lot of times we kind of think our job here is to kind of make it through the day, or just to kind of keep the wheels spinning. And I think that that's often enough for us for a while. But at some point, we all say, there's got to be more to this. There's got to be something deeper. And oftentimes, when we get to that point, we start to realize that the something deeper is this search for truth, the search for God, the search for love. And it always leads us deeper and deeper inside of ourselves, eventually to discover that what we've always been wanting is actually within us. And when we come to know that, there is really just a sort of happy homecoming. And I think that's basically what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, we're looking at something that seems very relevant with current headlines. We're moving into the final section of chapter 23, The War Against Yourself. And this one starts out with above the battleground. And good grief, we've got battlegrounds going on everywhere. So this is perhaps giving us a suggestion as to the direction we should be taking. So do you want me to start it off?
Sure, yeah, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, above the battleground. Do not remain in conflict, for there is no war without attack. The fear of God is fear of life and not of death. Yet he remains the only place of safety. In him is no attack, and no illusion in any form stalks heaven. Heaven is wholly true. No difference enters, and what is all the same cannot conflict. You are not asked to fight against your wish to murder, but you are asked to realize the form it takes conceals the same intent. And it is this you fear, and not the form. What is not love is murder. What is not loving must be an attack. Every illusion is an assault on truth, and everyone does violence to the idea of love because it seems to be of equal truth. And that's interesting, because my first thought as I was reading that was going back to some of the discussions that you'll encounter with Sigmund Freud about the id, and how the id is this the core essence of the ego, and it is the desire to murder even unto itself. It's the solitary death wish that propels the ego. So I think the ego is being outed in this first paragraph.
Yeah, and I think you could say that the Course in Miracles is all about outing the ego. That we need to really let this sort of false thought system that's within all of us come forward, be seen, not be denied, not be dismissed, but really just allowed. And because that's how we realize it's not what we want. I think a lot of us, and it's pretty common, where we sort of hide from our ego, or we pretend we don't have an ego. Especially as we get on the spiritual path, it's sometimes very tempting to say I'm a spiritual person, so I don't do anger, I don't do hatred. But I think sometimes we need to allow these things to come forward so that we can see it's not what we want. It's a little different way of dealing with it, but I think Jesus points to it really beautifully in this section when he said in that one sentence, "You are not asked to fight against your wish to murder." Now he's not really making that a question of whether or not you have a wish to murder. He's basically saying you do, and then he's telling you not to fight with it. So what that means is that we don't push against it, we don't deny it, we don't try to fix it in a way. We just acknowledge that there is some angry, hurt, painful, attacking part within us, and that we can let it come forward so that we can allow it to be undone.
Exactly. And the only way to address it ultimately is love it into the light, instead of fighting it with it or condemning it. Uh, it's a very easy journey because our truth, who we really are, is love at its very core. So um, Jesus in the Bible made that very simple statement: resist not evil. And a lot of people were confused by that. They didn't know exactly what he was trying to communicate. But here in A Course in Miracles, he expands on that idea magnificently and gives us a set of tools to work with to get away from, creating that conflict that ultimately ends up with our embracing guilt. Because, it's like if I have this thought of wanting to murder somebody, then I'm a bad person. So, and the Course is very, very adamant about that idea of releasing that instinct to feel guilty about our hidden thoughts, our private thoughts.
Yeah, and I think to realize that even if we're not having this thought about actually killing someone, that if we're having some version of upset, some version of anger, some version of lack of peace, that it really is all coming from the same source. As Jesus says elsewhere, a sense of mild irritation is merely a cover over intense rage. And he's helping us to see that basically lack of peace is lack of peace is lack of peace. And that what we really want is to come back into our true state of peacefulness, of happiness, of joy, and basically giving all of these false thoughts over to Spirit as a gift. You can even actually imagine that you have an altar within you, in your mind's eye, that you're putting these issues, putting these hurts, putting these upsets onto, and allowing them to melt away, allowing them to disappear into God's hands, allowing Spirit to take them from us. I think this mental image really helps us to shift away from them. So we're not hiding them, we're not pushing against them, but we're also not denying them. And eventually, all of this will melt away if we do this over and over and over again.
Yeah, it reminds me of that movie from back in the 50s, Forbidden Planet, when one of the principal actors is having to confront his own ego's darkest seed, and that is that desire to murder, to create chaos, and to do it in the name of love. Because the real issue here is that he has a daughter, and he feels that his daughter is going to be compromised, is going to lose her innocence to these people who come from the earth to visit him on his planet. And so if you haven't seen Forbidden Planet, it's got a good cast, and it's basically kind of the Tempest in sci-fi format. So if you like Shakespeare and you like sci-fi, here's the perfect blend.
Oh, that sounds good. It sounds like it's right up my alley. I haven't seen that one yet, though.
You will enjoy.
Nice. Well, and that actually reminds me a little bit, just kind of going back into sort of earlier tales. There's a medieval story about a knight called Parzival, and this is the knight that he, defeats all of the other knights, and but eventually he grows weary of all the battling, and and a sort of pivotal scene towards the end of the tale, he actually throws his sword and his armor into the lake. And what he realizes is that he actually is given everything he's ever wanted once he lays down his desire to attack and defend. And I think that that's a beautiful story because it's really what Jesus is telling us here. He says elsewhere that the truth needs no defense, and and that to defend is actually to attack. So these are just two sides of the same coin. This feeling like we need to defend, or that we're attacking someone, and really what we're asked to do is we're asked to kind of choose a different coin entirely, not just keep flipping it and playing out one side or the other. So I think this opening paragraph we've been reading really points to this whole dynamic.
It absolutely does. So you want to take us into the second paragraph?
Yeah, so just to continue on then, what can be equal to the truth yet different? Murder and love are incompatible. Yet if they both are true, then must they be the same and indistinguishable from one another. So will they be to those who see God's Son a body. For it is not the body that is like the Son's creator. And what is lifeless cannot be the Son of life. How can a body be extended to hold the universe? Can it create and be what it creates? And can it offer its creations all that it is and never suffer loss? So Jesus is really clearly here saying that the body is not our truth. He's saying that ultimately, we need to start to see that what we are is spirit, that what we are is love, that what we are is capital L life. And that's beyond the life that's here on this world of time and space. It's beyond our experience of waking up in the morning and going to bed at night. Now we're still going to do those things, but what we do even as we have these experiences is we start to step more and more fully into the deeper self that we really are. And this self is the self of love and kindness and joy. And it's the self beyond all of the ups and downs of this world.
Yeah, it's really curious how we have, created such a limited sense of self, because infinitude is, since we're, inhabiting a body, it's a concept that we have lost the ability to comprehend. Even in that idea that the universe is filled with so many stars that we don't even have a word for the number of them. That kind of a thought of infinitude really is something we slam up against over and over and over again. And yet the truth is, as soon as we're willing to step out of our limitation, out of our belief that we are confined in a body and restricted to a body, all of a sudden this expansive experience becomes available to us. And it's an opportunity to transcend all of our trivialities, all of our smallness, all of our pettiness, all of our little peccadillos that cause us so much grief and so much frustration and sorrow.
Yeah, yeah. So, we really do see all of these things here in the world as things that are going to be our salvation. So something here will be the answer that will make us happy, or something here didn't go right and it's the cause of why we're sad. But what we come to see as we work with these ideas more and more is that nothing in this world can actually be the source of our happiness or our sorrow. And what that does is it takes us out of the victim role, and it puts us back on the driver's seat. So what it means is that we have this peace within us, and it's always there for us to return to over and over again. And we start to see the things that are even upsetting here in the world as opportunities, because they point us to looking at something that when we release it, then we come back into that state of happiness. So we start to see even the problems, quote unquote problems, as something that really can benefit us if we're willing to hand it over to Spirit and look at it through that new perspective.
Right. And as we continue here with this next paragraph, it says, God does not share his function with a body. He gave the function to create unto his Son because it is his own. It is not sinful to believe the function of the Son is murder, but it is insanity. So once again, we're given that escape clause from loading up on guilt, from self-condemnation. What is the same can have no different function. Creation is the means for God's extension, and what is his must be his Son's as well. Either the Father and the Son are murderers, or neither is. Life makes not death, creating like itself. I love that last line. Life does not make death, but it does extend life. So, every time somebody around you has a baby, every time your puppy dog or your kitty cat has a kitten or a puppy, all of these are literal ideas, images that deal with that idea of extension of life, extension of love, extension of truth and grace. And so even in our most limited construct that we've created here in this mortal world, there's still this reminder that our true function is to extend life in all directions.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, we can also think of all this in terms of kindness. That if we're sharing kindness, if we're acting with compassion, if we're seeing beyond the fear in others, that too is really an extension of life. That's an extension of love, an extension of truth. And I think one of the things that often we could use some more help with is extending that kindness to ourselves. A lot of times people are, they start to get into these ideas. They realize, oh yeah, I'm going to act kindly. I'm gonna say words of kindness because if there's only one of us, and I'm it, then I'm going to be kind to other people also because that's coming back to me. But sometimes we kind of have a little blind spot for one person, and often that one person is ourself. And I think it's helpful for us just to remember that we can't leave ourselves out of love's embrace, because if we leave anyone out, then we're leaving everyone out. And eventually, we want to get to this point where no one is feeling separate from us, so that we can practice this love and this joy with everyone we meet.
Absolutely. And at the core of all of this is that idea of forgiveness that the Course is constantly reiterating. And forgiveness is not confined to the idea of, you actually did it, but I'm going to dismiss the realness of this and forgive you. True forgiveness is arriving at that juncture where we recognize that none of this is real. And so there is nothing ultimately to forgive. So really the act of forgiveness is the acknowledgement that the truth has never been corrupted and the truth is always eternal and it is going to remain so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that idea that we can't really attack God. We can't really attack truth, even if we think we have. That's just a false idea. And I think he's really emphasizing this, that it's all one or the other. Either truth is still true and still eternal, or somehow murder, as he says over and over again here, is real, but it's not. And we can really question that whole thought system, which helps us to let go of our attachment to it. So as he continues on here in the next paragraph, the lovely light of your relationship is like the love of God. It cannot yet assume the holy function God gave his Son, for your forgiveness of your brother is not complete as yet, and so it cannot be extended to all creation. Each form of murder and attack that still attracts you, and that you do not recognize for what it is, limits the healing and the miracles you have the power to extend to all. Yet does the Holy Spirit understand how to increase your little gifts and make them mighty. Also, he understands how your relationship is raised above the battleground. In it no more. This is your part, to realize that murder in any form is not your will. The overlooking of the battleground is now your purpose. So this leads us into this idea of again, not denying or pretending that things don't sometimes hurt here, or that the world is often cruel or callous, but not getting sucked into it either. So we can watch things that happen here. We can be with them. We can even respond appropriately and take action, but without having a strong investment in the things that are unfolding. And this way of being really spares us of upset, it spares us of suffering, it spares us of a lack of peace. And that in itself is a beautiful gift, but it does lead us also to the experience of the deepest truth within, which is what we're all going for.
Exactly. In this realm, the old law of action and reaction is fundamental to everything we encounter. So for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And that is definitely something that we begin to recognize as we continue to pursue A Course in Miracles. We are able to very clearly identify how, whenever we're in a defensive stance, when we are fighting for truth, when we are fighting for peace, it just pushes the pendulum back and forth and back and forth. It doesn't really resolve anything. Been fighting for peace for 10,000 years, and we have this outbreak right now of the illusion of chaos and death and doom and disaster all around us. So it's very important for us to realize that anytime we push back, we are in fact attaching ourselves to it. And it's like viper. Once you're attached to it, your wings will get stuck, and it will be a lot more difficult for you to ascend from that position.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that when we're in these places that feel a little stuck, to realize that we still have help, we still have guidance, we still are not alone, because this idea of being separate is really pretty synonymous with the feeling of being alone. What does this lonely feeling say? But I'm not with others. I'm not with people I love. I'm not where I need to be. But none of those statements are really the truth, because we are always complete love. We are always complete peace. And coming into that awareness is really what this is all about. And that we're being led step by step to that experience of God's love that is eternally with us. And we will come to know in its entirety.
Yeah, it's again a journey with no distance being experienced ultimately, and in the final chapter of of the story of who we are in this material realm. So continuing here, it says, "Be lifted up, and from a higher place look down upon it. From there will your perspective be quite different. Here in the midst of it, it does seem real. Here you have chosen to be part of it. Here murder is your choice. Yet from above, the choice is miracles instead of murder. And the perspective coming from this choice shows you the battle is not real and is easily escaped. Bodies may battle, but the clash of forms is meaningless. And it is over when you realize that it was never begun. How can a battle be perceived as nothingness when you engage in it? How can the truth of miracles be recognized if murder is your choice? So we are drawn back to that recognition that if we engage, if we jump into it, we're going to be stuck with it. And that definitely bogs us down. You know, the faster we are able to transcend this mortal plateau where it appears that we are lopping off heads and rectifying wrongs and a crusader for light and love, when in actual fact we're just joining in the mayhem. And so we have to, like that song, lay down your arms. We have to arrive at a place where we to be personal and cast our armament into the lake.
Exactly, exactly. Because if we start taking this world too seriously, it is gonna take us into that serious place. So we need to remember to have a little fun, and I think that's kind of a good idea for us to have as we start to wind down. Is make sure you have fun, a lot of fun, everyone, because that fun is always here for us. And yeah, so don't forget to laugh. Which is actually a beautiful line. That's the title of a book about Bill Thetford. So I encourage people to check that out too. It's a great story about his side of things and the scribing of the course in his life. So yeah, make sure you have a little fun today, and until we see you next time.
Yes, absolutely. And are all of your tennis balls happy face tennis balls? Because that to me is some sort of a sublime message from a higher source. That poor tennis ball gets smacked back and forth, but its happiness endures all the travails of this realm.
There you go. Even the ball is happy while it's bouncing off the wall.
Exactly. Well, Barrett, it was a wonderful opportunity to once again engage in discussing A Course in Miracles, and we will see you in 1 week.
I look forward to it, Chris. You have a great one.
You too.